It's a little bit after 2, so we'll go ahead and get started. Want to respect everybody's time. I'm going to make a pledge that we'll be out of here within an hour or less. So we're going to have to be moving, but appreciate everyone coming. Got a great turnout. What we're going to try to accomplish today is I'll do a very quick recap of where we are in our situation here with our comprehensive plan. Croy Engineering will come and do a brief presentation on their firm and capabilities, and then I'm just going to open it up and just have a discussion. They can talk about the way, they've done this a lot, and they can talk about the process. And what I hope to get from you guys is a little direction and to give them some priorities and talk about what is important to our county as far as what we would like to see in this plan. So you will remember back on October 11th, we had our initial steering committee meeting. We discussed the content of the RFQ, and that got all rolled into the document on November 6th. That was released by Lincoln County Finance Department. We had a submission deadline of December the 12th in the RFQ. We had 2 compliant offers. And we had an additional offer, which I'll talk about this in a minute. It was not really intended to be compliant. We'll talk about that later. But we had 2 compliant offers that the Planning Commission considered, and they evaluated both offers or both capability briefs. And then on December the 7th, the Planning Commission met and down selected to Croy Engineering, and we have their representative here. Of course, you all were provided a copy of their proposal back on the 11th, and then we're here today to talk about to do just a exchange here of ideas with Croy, and for them to make sure that they hear from us and what we think is important as a county. So just a reminder, in the RFQ, this is all that we put in there. The language is important, may include, but is not limited to, so basically, wide open here. But there's a lot of stuff here. I think we can all agree with that, and I think they're going to talk about that too. There's a whole lot that we would like to see done, and of course we have constraints just like everybody else in terms of resources and that kind of thing, our budget for this project. So, we may have to do some trade-offs. I would like to talk about maybe to see if we can get some pricing in a modular sense so that we can have certain elements and what, if we add this, what it would cost, and give us an idea so we can pick and choose and make the most of the budget that we have. So I'll turn this over. Mr. Houston Matthews, what is your title, Houston?
Alabama manager.
There we go.
Office manager.
Okay. So he's with Croy Engineering. He's going to give us a brief overview of their firm, and then he's got some I guess some of your personnel, some of your engineers online here to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Here's this.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Houston Matthews, Croy Engineering. I know a great many of you, and we're proud to be here. A few housekeeping items. So I've got 2 team members that are on a Teams meeting here. You don't have to see them, and they can't see you, but I think if we could maybe unmute them, and then I know their names are Dan and Ethan, so Dan and Ethan are listening in the background. Guys, just mute yourselves, and if you need to add something to it, just be sure to unmute when we get to that point. That way we won't have to swap screens. Thank you for the opportunity. We're proud to be selected. We've done a great deal of work in this community. Again, a lot of familiar faces in the crowd. Our office is in Huntsville, Alabama. I manage our Huntsville office. Our company is headquartered in Marietta, Georgia. We have about 100 and some odd folks that work for us. I've got 13 that work for me in Huntsville. I serve as for this project, will serve as your primary point of contact, as I do for the work we do for Fayetteville and for Lincoln County. I saw the mayor in the parking lot earlier, and he said, I just ought to move up here, and then offered me a barn of some kind. So I'm not sure how good that would be for me, but we're proud to have been selected. We're proud to continue our relationship with your community. And really, congratulations to you and all of you for participating in this project. It's a intense endeavor, and it's a commitment on your behalf to the community. So it's not every community does that, and it's a positive that you guys have decided collectively to move forward in that way. Some of the goals that I think we'd like to get to today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our company, a little bit about the primary team that's going to be working for you on the project. We're going to talk a little bit about how our approach to the job, which was in our statement of qualifications, and a little bit of the process, and then ultimately we want to hear from stakeholders on what's important in the plan and what's important to be included in the plan from your perspective. What I'd like to be able to walk away from today is to have a pretty good idea of what you want me to include in a scope of work so that I can prepare a proposal and get that back to you. And there's a lot of moving parts and pieces that go along with that. As the commissioner said, you've got a long list of items that you'd prefer to be included in a comp plan and are typically included in a comp plan. And we've addressed some of that in our approach, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. If you can flip to the next slide. Oh, that's me, sorry. There we go. Like I said, our company is headquartered in Marietta, Georgia. We've got about 100 folks, 13 in our office. I manage our Huntsville office. One of our team members, Dan Dobry, our senior planner, is headquartered in our Marietta office. Our other team member, Ethan Green, is in our Chattanooga office. We do a variety of work across the southeast region, mainly in Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama. We do a little bit of work in Mississippi, and we've done a lot of work in this community for a long, long time, and have enjoyed working with both Lincoln County and the city of Fayetteville for a long time. So our company's been in business 18 years. We've been here in Huntsville for just about 12 years. I've been at Croy for 5 years. For 8 years prior to that, I served as the assistant engineer in Madison County, so I had a public sector stint there for a bit, and I was in the consulting business before that. So a little bit about us. And again, in the interest of time, I'll just kind of roll through this. If you have any questions at all, just feel free to shout out, raise your hands. There's no set agenda that I have, and I do want to be, keep your time in mind too. So this is your primary project team. Again, I'll serve as the primary point of contact. I'll be the primary communication link between steering committee and however we're going to communicate together. I'll relay information back to our team. Generally, we'll relay that through me back to you or whoever the designee is, and how we decide to communicate. Dan Dobry is our project manager. He is in our Marietta office. He's a senior project manager. He's been at Croy for a long, long time. He's got a lot of experience, and we've got an experience slide showing up. He's done a lot of work on those projects. Ethan is another team member. He's in our Chattanooga office, and he's going to be helping us out with some more of the detailed work included in the plans. And I told him I would pitch to them at this point. So Dan and Ethan, do you just want to say hello and introduce yourselves if you can? And just bear in mind we can hear you and not see you. Okay, maybe not. That's all right. That's all right. We won't. We'll carry on.
They can unmute themselves.
Hey, Dan, unmute yourself if you can.
Okay, Houston, how's my volume?
There you go, loud and clear.
Great. Yeah, you just never know when this ends.
Dan, you've got the mic there. Say hello to everybody. Give us a little bit of an introduction about you, and then Ethan next, please.
Okay, and I'm joined by Ethan Green here. So my name is Dan Dobry. I head up the Transportation Planning Division for Croy Engineering. In the engineering and planning field for 45 years. At one point, I was lucky enough to be the director of the Department of Transportation for Cobb County, which is northwest of Atlanta, and have been involved in a number of comp plans as well as comprehensive transportation plans. On a personal note, next year my wife and I will celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary.
Great, thank you, Dan. Ethan?
Hey, Ethan Green here. I am a planner. I work under Dan in the Transportation Planning Division. I have been with Roy for a little under a year now. Before that, I was with Shelby County. It was the Memphis MPO as a transportation planner with them. Lifelong resident of the state of Tennessee. I do have some experience. I was the planning director for a small community in Mississippi previous to moving to Memphis. So I have done land use planning as well as transportation planning. And my background in formal education is in planning rather than engineering as well.
Thanks, Ethan. Can we flip back to the slideshow, please? Thank you. So Dan and Ethan and myself will be serve as the primary roles throughout the life of the project. Our next slide is just some of the staff that we have assigned to the project. As the commissioner said, you've got a long list of items that you'd like to be included in a comprehensive plan. And generally, a comprehensive plan has a number of different items related to it. So this is to demonstrate and show you that the approach that we put together is also coupled with experience that's in our office. We don't have any subs assigned to the project. These are all CROI employees. Greg Teague, bottom left, is our CEO. He's one of our 3 company partners. Eddie Wade is also another partner in our company. Sasha is our vice president. So we have a lot of experience at a high level for all the different aspects of a comprehensive plan, and to include the parts and pieces that you've included in yours. And we've tried to demonstrate that through our approach, but we wanted to show you just a snippet of who might be helping and participating from our side in the plan, and that they're all CROI employees. And we'll work through the scope as we kind of get to those parts and pieces for what's going to be included. A little bit about our experience. So we've done a number of planning projects and comprehensive plans. This is just a few of them. We just wanted to create kind of a short slide. Again, this was in our statement of qualifications that I'm sure that you saw, but we've got a good bit of experience on the planning side. We've probably the most recent one, I think, is relative here is the Gunnersville Comprehensive Plan, though I'm not entirely sure that their Planning Commission has formally approved it yet, but it's, from our work, it's in the finished product stage. And then I had a lot of participation in our Huntsville long-range transportation plan. That was through the Huntsville area MPO, and that was transportation planning focused, but had a large steering committee, as you might expect, for those transportation type of improvements, and was a long-term project that we executed for the MPO. So just a little bit of a quick slide to show some of our experience. We wrote in our statement of qualifications several pages on how we would approach the project that you described in the request for qualifications. We tried to boil it down for today's meeting just in these kind of 4 steps. Now, note that these are not consecutive, but they do relatively start at the beginning and relatively end with the finished deliverable, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all of these are going to occur in this order, but these are kind of the buckets that our approach was built on, beginning with project management. There's obviously a public involvement component to it. We're going to talk a little bit more about the plan development and the needs assessment. There's a lot of data collection that goes into a project like this, and then ultimately the deliverable. This steering committee is a big part of the process, and it's really great that we have often started projects like this before, where we're encouraging a client to form a steering committee. In this case, you've already been formed, so you're a little bit ahead, and that's a positive. And that you have so many, as evidenced by everybody that's here, you have a large contingent that has a vested interest in the product and in the process itself. So this is just a small demonstration of kind of what we tried to explain in more detail in our approach. I'll let Dan go into, and Ethan, if they have any, go into some details on this. But generally, this is not exactly chronological, but the larger buckets and larger parts and pieces of project start to finish. Dan, can you add anything to that?
No, you've done a good intro, Houston. We do appreciate the interest, with the formation of the steering committee. The more input we receive, the better we can understand the vision and goals for Lincoln County in order to help provide that playbook that helps decision-making for where you would like the future of the community to be. So, understanding, who and what is Lincoln County with demographic assessment, looking at income ranges, education, is a very strong foundation in order to move forward with developing the comprehensive plan, which will be disaggregated into different, what we call character areas for the county. The public engagement portion, and we found that through social media with a website hosted by the county survey gives us another great source of information for what the future should be for Lincoln County. And then with all of that, forming a needs assessment so that plans through a short-term work program can be developed. Ethan, would you like to add anything?
Just real briefly, I know that he's touched on this a little bit, that this is not a linear approach. A lot of these will go on concurrently, and the emphasis also is that this is a collaborative process, that this is not Freud telling you what your plan needs to be or what your goals are, but that we work with you in order to discover what those are and shape them and create actionable items for the future.
So our next slide just says, we don't have to flip there, our next slide just says, let's talk. So this is kind of where our formal presentation part ended. But I wanted to try to help begin the conversation portion of this meeting by saying that a comprehensive plan generally, very broadly, is not a document that sometime in the future somebody's going to present something to the Planning Commission and you're going to go, oh no, pull this out, and on page 53 this says we don't do this. It's not a document that when you have an idea you say, oh no, we can't do it because it's not in here, or we have to do it because it is in here. It's really not intended to be that specific. It's intended to be broader in nature. It's intended to be a living document that is molded over a period of time to what you see the needs are, and what comes before planning commissions and the entire county and community together. It's intended to be a reference. It's intended to be a tool. So it's pretty broad in nature. You've got a lot of topics that you wanted to include in your scope of work. I'm interested to hear from some or all the members of the steering committee about what's important to you. Again, it's going to help us to draft and generate a scope of work. We'll be under contract with the county to produce the document at some point, so we need to have a defined scope of work for what we're going to produce, and who's going to participate in what parts of that. And I think ultimately you probably want to know how long is it going to take and what's it going to cost. But for both of those perspectives, it begins with what you want to include and what you can include. So I'll open it up. I'm happy to take any questions. I'm happy to hear from anybody, from everybody. Again, we're proud to have been selected and want this meeting to be productive. I hope that we come away with this and have an opportunity to begin drafting a proposal, and there'll probably be some things we've got to come back and forth on. But I think now is a good time to kind of hear, if that's what you want, Commissioner, but to hear about what's important, and all that will be helpful to us in drafting a scope of work. I did have a conversation earlier about just general timeline, and you can feel free to keep going. You know, we were talking about this some in the office. A completed comprehensive plan with any scope is not a 6-month process. I hope that you have some understanding that you know your steering committee is going to be engaged for quite some time. It's a long process. It's somewhere in the order of 9 to 12 months. It can be a little bit longer depending on scope. But to do one in 6 months means that there's some pretty significant elements of it that are left out. And I'll give you one example. Stakeholder input in 2 forms is critical. Stakeholder input from a steering committee, is critical to the completion of a comprehensive plan. Public input is critical to the completion of a comprehensive plan. And because we're going to seek input from a wide variety of sources, there has to be ample time to allow the people who are going to respond to see that input is needed, to put some thought into it and get that back. You can't do, for example, you wouldn't want to do public input and put a survey out for a week. You know, you want it to be for an extended period of time that's defined, but enough time to generate some solid response. Same thing for your steering committee. You wouldn't want to, you know, it wouldn't serve a good purpose if I said, hey, all of you got to leave here and I need a list of what you want in 3 days. That's not going to be enough time to provoke enough thought that's going to result in a beneficial comprehensive plan. So just generally from a schedule standpoint, you know, it's a long commitment, but the benefit is that it's a higher quality product at the end.
I don't remember what I told each of you to persuade you to be on this committee, but I probably didn't tell you a year. So surprise, it's for a year. But to your point.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine.
Out from there.
This is, again, back up to the slide that I had originally. This is an excerpt from the RFQ. These are the things that we kind of generated at our previous meeting, things that we thought were important to put in this plan. So, if you can go back that yeah. So if you will, you know, the ones that have interest in these different areas, if you want to ask questions about this or tell why you think that's a priority or whatever, you know, I think that would be beneficial for Houston to hear. Anybody want to take a shot at what, you know, what our top priorities are?
I'll take a shot at it. Is that because this is where this shot's coming from what public pushback has been in areas, and what requests have been is, of course, number one would be land use planning on it, where do we want certain things and where do we want to restrict things. I think most people in Lincoln County don't want a lot to change about our rural environment, but they still want jobs and grow industry and to have some of the commerce that makes a community livable and especially attractive to young adults, which we think maybe that's one of our weaknesses, is drawing back our young people coming here. So I would say that's one of the things that's come up in county government would be land use, and then followed strictly or closely rather by our limitations on utilities, especially as it relates to out in the county, as it relates to water. And then when it gets to transportation, the two biggest things that we worked on for a long time that's never got on the planning with the state of Tennessee is because most people look at the southwest part of our county as probably where our major growth, because that's where the major jobs are south of us. We have a real weakness on Railroad Bed Road as it goes towards Highway 53 into Huntsville. A lot of traffic there. It's accumulator of a lot of traffic. And that area there is one, and the other was we've never got on the planning books on the north bypass around Fayetteville, which is one of the priorities that we've expressed to the state over a number of years, those two projects, but they've not got on their planning board.
And I would assume having them addressed in a plan like this would help push it up the priority list, maybe? Is it a true statement?
I think it would. It's just, we've still got so many projects. The River Bridge and the Huntsville Highway between the River Bridge and 110 are such expensive projects that we've got our share of money. It's just, we haven't got long-term either one of those projects on the books. We've got our share of money, and both of those are coming down the pike, but they're gonna be before either of those two projects even get on the books, probably.
Amy, you have?
Yeah, I have a question, and I have to pick up kids from school, but I saw in your past projects anywhere between 3 and 7 points as to like the scope of services. So for a town of our size and for our budget, how many of these should we try to prioritize? Or like would it, does price our budget depend on, specifically which ones we pick?
Not necessarily on which ones you pick. Probably more related to how it's executed. We could spend a great deal of your budget just doing public input. If you said it's critical for us to have a lot of public input and we need you, Croy, to manage a meeting at every school and survey requests and all of that, you could spend a great deal of your budget just on that portion of it. I don't think all of that is terribly needed for a project of this size, even though some of it is. So there are ways that we can reduce that effort as a part of our scope. You can participate and you can help out in some of that too, to reduce the effort that we have to do to promote that into the comprehensive plan. Another item is the data collection. Generally, there is a very significant data collection aspect related to a comprehensive plan. If you have the ability to provide that data either from another source or some other way, rather than us scouring our resources and finding it all, which can be timely. Again, that's just another opportunity to free up some budget available towards the end product. So it's not necessarily this one's going to cost you X, Y, and Z. It's more where are the largest buckets of time and energy and effort from a cost perspective for us. Now, I want to be very fair. This is an extensive list. Your budget does not end up with a comprehensive plan that includes all of these items. It could include some parts and pieces of most of them, but this is much more of a robust, comprehensive plan than what your budget allows for. So there is a disconnect. There's a disconnect between scope and budget, and that's why we wanted to try to come away today with a better understanding of where our focus should be, so that we can craft a scope of work that would help end in a completed comprehensive plan, and help to identify which of these are, from our perspective, may not be as critical. But I can't do that until I hear from you which of these are more critical. Yes, sir.
Can you provide like an overview of what is included in land use planning? I'm not familiar with it.
I'm going to, Dan, the question from the audience was, could we describe what's included in land use planning? Can you or Ethan?
Yeah, land use planning broadly, at least at a municipal or comprehensive planning level, looks at, as the name implies, how the county plans for the use of the land within its jurisdiction. So sometimes that can include economic development. You know, as you noted, you're talking about bringing in businesses or wanting to attract that. But primarily it concerns itself with the county's tools for land use control, which typically is zoning. You know, not every county or municipality goes that route. Famously, Houston is unzoned despite being quite large and urban. So there are a variety of different tools or approaches that you can use to you know, maintain the character of, say, traditional Main Street like downtown Fayetteville versus rural communities versus suburban development. But it basically, it looks at you know, how does the city plan for an increase in population or an increase in employment, and how do you square you know, the complaints that you hear in the commission meeting of wanting to protect or maintain character or being sort of resistant to change broadly with you know, the inevitable growth and development of a thriving community.
And an example of that from your neighbor, my hometown, is Madison County. As many of you know, Madison County does not have any zoning. There's no zoning. There's no planning commission of unincorporated Madison County. There is no zoning. There, of course, is in Huntsville and Madison and the incorporated cities, but outside the incorporated areas, the Madison County does not have a planning commission. There are no zoning requirements. So when I get those calls from developers about, hey, what do I need to do this and this and this, they're always very surprised when I tell them that yeah, if you're in an unincorporated county, there are no rules, and you can't do everything that you might exactly want to, because they do have a building inspection department, but it's not near as stringent, and you don't involve the approval of a planning commission. So just an example, you know, relative to two ends of land planning.
I think I would add on to what Bill said. I think it ties in, from the meetings I've been in, housing is probably the number one thing that's coming up for our community, of what's needed. Whether that's affordable apartments that are not income subsidized, or, you know, just single family homes. That's, like I said, that's coming from a lot of meetings I've been part of. And I think tying into that too is talk about young families, or really older families too, which is quality of life, livability and recreational planning, because I think so much falls under that. Like when I look at recreational planning, I think of, you know, a rec center, you know, but like one that has pickleball courts and tennis courts and just lots of different things out there that are available. And then our amazing natural resources that we have here in the river, of what that can do to tie into tourism, which also brings in tax dollars. And, you know, I think about hopefully Wellsville Park, also what that can bring in, not only for the people that live here, but I think all that ties in, like you said, you're talking about retaining young families and bringing people back, but also, you know, I like stuff like that. So I think all that's good.
This is Dan, and I appreciate those comments. When we met with the Gunnersville Steering Committee, their top priority was affordable housing. They were concerned about who would be the future citizens in Gunnersville if they couldn't afford to live there. So, you know, this conversation is very helpful to us, because we do need the ancillary activities, as you said, with recreation and protecting the environmental resource is helpful in understanding how we would want to craft the scope to, you know, look at those land use activities and desirable objectives and put that as all part of a good comprehensive plan for the county.
And I should have maybe noted beforehand that I am not a planner. I'm a professional engineer. You know, Dan and Ethan are our resources on the planning side. So I may have wide eyes when you ask some of these questions. That's why I defer to my experts here. But related to quality of life and the work that we do and what we're seeing in Huntsville and the surrounding area, it comes up in almost every conversation. It's relative to housing density, it's relative to housing type, and I think, you know, Huntsville is seeing the similar thing. If you've been to Huntsville, you see there's 8 billion apartments that are going up now, and none of them are what I would consider affordable. You know, it's a tough market for that, but it's a part of so many discussions. So it's a great point to include and talk about.
Our realtors on FaceTime, and she couldn't be at the meeting, but she wanted to ask a question, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to hear her or not.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Everybody hear me? Okay. Hey, thank you. Sorry, Dr. Bartlett, I'm sorry I had to be out there. I'll be glad I can face our mission listening and appreciate everybody being there. But obviously, we're with minds and think about housing all day, every day. And would love to know the Troy maybe recommendation or experience or from other places. We agree. I think that we gave the wisdom, of course, I could hear Mr. Bill. And, you know, kind of just an open discussion, an incentive in some way, that, you know, the contractors are willing to build the content, or willing to build some type of affordable housing. It's kind of that middle market, thing. Have you ever seen a way that that's been executed? Because it's kind of hard to, you know, Fayetteville's motto, Fayetteville County tradition means tomorrow. We don't want to lose that tradition. I agree with Bill. We want to keep that rural housing. We don't want just houses to go up anywhere for any reason, you know. Literally, that's more of a planning committee to see if Troy has the, you know, experience or has on making sense. But some type of incentive for these contractors or the housing somehow, like, take a little kid literally, is not, we're going to be in the same place a year from now. And nobody's figured out how to way to encourage all these houses and if people live here, then all of that rolls downhill, all the recreational, everything, you know, kind of comes back to it. Of course, in my opinion, but if that makes sense.
Sure. So I don't know if everybody now repeated what I heard. Is the question was related to affordable housing and providing incentives to builders, to contractors, et cetera, for affordable housing. And I'll ask Dan and Ethan about this thing, but just from my perspective, I have not seen community provided incentives for affordable housing. Because I think it really is more, it's a part of, there's a business decision at some point for a developer who's going to invest X amount of dollars in a property that's so and so big to get X number of units out of it. And that largely, and combined with their construction costs, drives what they're going to have to receive in rent to make a viable project at the end of it. Affordable housing, in my opinion, is the subject in general is pretty tricky. Communities want affordable housing. Neighbors don't. Neighbors don't. It has I think that it has a slightly negative connotation from the beginning, because I hear affordable housing, and what I hear is, because I work for these developers and clients who are building, and they're aware of their cost, and they put tons and tons of thought into it before they ever even call me to help them design it. So I know that they're cost conscious and budget conscious, and they have a finite budget, et cetera, and all of that is complicated over the past year with the interest rates and everything else we see when we turn on the news every day. But I think what the public hears is cheap. I say economical, and what may be heard is cheap, and neighbors don't really like that. So it's a tough, tricky situation. I've not seen a community do it. I think in the way that may be asked is, is there a
That's why the question was asked, because I feel that it is impossible, because, what do you do? The contractors have to make money, but then on the other side, people need a place to live, so.
Yeah.
That's great, that answers my question.
So where I have seen it, it's not an incentive, but really the opposite. Where you can de-incentivize developers is being unfriendly to development from an approval, from a zoning standpoint, from a code standpoint. If your process, if your codes, if your restrictions, if your ordinances make it so difficult for a developer to be interested in coming into a market because of whatever reasons, that de-incentivizes the interest in the general market to begin with. And I'm not saying that you have that here. I'm just saying that for communities who want to do the opposite, communities who want to say, we don't need any more apartments, or we don't need any of this, they strengthen their zoning regulations. They strengthen the ways that they can enforce and deny applications. They don't allow rezonings. Madison, Alabama, for example. Madison is surrounded, the city limits are surrounded by the city of Huntsville, so they don't have any other way to annex new property into the city. So they have a finite tax revenue base. They've got a finite amount of land that can be developed. They've got a finite budget for schools, for utilities. And so they are very stringent on rezonings. If you have a residentially zoned property for single family and you want to build an apartment complex on it, it's probably not happening. From a density standpoint, they can't afford for a property who may render 50 single family lots to go to 350 apartments because it affects utilities and schools and all the other things that come along with that amount of population growth. So not an exact answer to the question, but and Dan, Ethan, do you have any experience with incentives related to the promotion of affordable housing?
Yeah. So you hit on some there, Houston. There are sort of two approaches to this, and they are you can make your housing more robust through demand side and through the supply side controls. And so some of the things that you talked about, which is generally my preferred approach, especially when it comes to trying to be budget conscious, is just if you want to encourage housing, make it easier for developers to navigate the regulations. They shouldn't be obtuse. It should be clear what, when they're filling out their permitting forms, what they need to fill out, how much it's going to cost, how long the process will take from start to finish, because every month that they're going through a rezoning application or a conditional use permitting is another month that they're paying interest on their construction loans or their land. And then in addition, like you said, the actual supply of land that they're looking for, whether that's available or not, which is controlled through the zoning in and of itself. So having something clear, and that's where this comprehensive plan comes in, is if you have a 10 or 20 year vision for how you imagine the county grows and develops, developers can look and see and say, hey, okay, this corner of the county, after rounds of input planning, just intended to stay rural. So I don't need to be looking to fill out a pro forma for an apartment out here. But I would be able to potentially develop, something that's a little bit denser in an area that is ready to support that, that's got maybe the existing utilities or a school that's ready for growth. And then the other side is demand. If you're talking about how can a community do this, where are opportunities outside of government is, make Lincoln County a great place to live. Whether that's a business owner expanding their business, you as a consumer helping support businesses, the more people that want to live in your community, the higher the demand for that housing will grow, which will draw those developers to your community. There are obviously other options out there, so you can go through FHA has got loans that come in that trigger when you hit a specific percentage of below the median income housing. So if you're offering something for rent and within your area it's under the median income, you get certain subsidies. And then state and local government are also welcome to come in and incentivize any way they like with, whether those are tax incentives is the most common control that you use to do that. But those kick in with people who are, those get more costly and more expensive because you're forgoing your revenue on housing that then you have to come in and support through your utilities and transportation systems. So first and foremost, the low-hanging fruit is just making, coming together as a community, deciding how you want to grow, and then B, making it as easy as possible to achieve that goal.
I want to add one thing though. I understand that we do need affordable housing, but I want to add too, if we lose the majority of our industry executives that move here to work, do not live here because there's no executive housing. They can't find anything that's suitable that they want to live in, and we've lost the majority. I mean, anybody that knows them could probably speak. But also it's that there's no rental, like how, and that's what's not income subsidized rental, but a nice place that they can move here and rent, like a condo or something of that nature. So I think our housing is very broad of what's needed or what we need to think about, not just affordable, that connotation of affordable.
Sure. Well, and I'm looking at a few notes that we made in a conversation that our team had before today, where we were trying to craft some broad perspectives on a comprehensive plan that could be tailored to the budget that you've got. And I'm just going to read you the first 4 items that we wrote down because they tie to exactly what we're talking about: land use, economic development, housing, and planning and public services. So for the most part, that's almost exactly what we're talking about here, with the exception of the transportation infrastructure that's also been discussed. So I was looking down while Ethan was talking here, and I think we're fairly well aligned in what I'm hearing you say and kind of what we had discussed in the background about the priorities for a plan. So just a side note, while I thought about it,
On the land use side, I come from the ag background, and so to us, with the Farm Bureau, private property rights are definitely a priority in what we believe, and that's in part of our not bylaws, but part of our resolutions. And we're big on that, but what I guess what I fear in this is how much is, I know it's going to affect the land. Huntsville's already affected what we do here in Lincoln County as far as our land use. We've seen, of course, with the tax change that happened this last year here in the county itself, is going to greatly affect what I'm going to be able to do this coming year, what all farmers in the area are going to be able to do this coming year as far as rent prices. Everybody that I've talked to, hey, my taxes are up, I got to go up on rent. So we're hearing that over and over. How can we couple all of this with the land use planning, with all that, without putting extra burden on the property tax and on that? And I know that's ultimately going to be left up to the commission, but is there a way to accomplish these goals and make that happen, where we've got affordable housing, we've got a good land use plan, we've got we've got all this other stuff, but without putting a burden upon the landowner himself?
So really what I think I hear you saying is, how do you compare and how do we include in a comprehensive plan a connection between planning, which is a big broad topic and doesn't mean anything, it's going to change is how you react to it, and a tax base. So
That's one element of it.
Dan, Ethan, can you guys, do you have any input related to the planning aspect and the tax base?
Can I want to get a little bit of clarification here real quick. So this question is posed, you're using the term rent to refer to the taxes that you owe as a landowner, not that you're renting agricultural land. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
It's a little bit of both, actually. With the property we own, that would just be my tax base, what I would pay. But the biggest part of it is land we actually lease from another landowner to do our agriculture farming on.
Yeah, this is agricultural cash rent basis.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's a balance that market forces control a lot of. Like you noted, this growth in Huntsville is driving people, further out into, the sort of exurbs and suburbs, longer commute times, and as people venture further north, there's a greater demand in Lincoln County, which is raising the cost of land. So coming back to zoning, one control that you use is if you zone a bunch of land for agricultural, you kind of freeze it for any other use, which devalues it and makes the property taxes worth a little less. Now, that also, as far as the landowner is concerned, removes what they're able to do with it. So you kind of are permanently making it agricultural, which if you are looking to cash out and sell to a developer long-term, that may hinder you, but it also short-term for people who are second, third, fourth generation farmers, you've got that sort of controller stability set in. Another thing to consider is as you kind of look at the county as a whole and start to think about areas that you want to develop versus areas that you don't want to develop, you see that you bring in a higher value land use going from agricultural to, and when I say value, I'm speaking purely in the assessed sense, not the vitality for society figure of speech. But as you move from agricultural to suburban to multifamily to commercial, you are getting more out of your tax base per acre. So if you are able to look at some areas that are ripe for growth and redevelopment, the county, using the same amount of land and the same amount of resources, is able to see an increase in revenue without raising taxes, which may allow them to offer some sort of respite to agricultural land on the edges. But at the end of the day, it's a conversation about balance and what the community's priorities are.
I'm kind of torn here because we're pushing on at an hour here, and I know I want to respect everybody's time. At the same time, this has been, I think, very productive. Any other burning questions that somebody wants to throw out there?
I think we've covered a lot of stuff here.
Houston, I have a question. You speak that this is a long list. Would it behoove us to kind of shorten this list? I mean, think about what we really, really want and shorten this list somewhat. We know we can't do it all this round, and maybe in the future we can add some more things, but should we shorten this list?
What I prefer to do, and we'll take whatever input you have, but I think I've heard enough today where we could craft a draft scope and give you an opinion, a recommendation for a pathway to start. And that's not going to be concrete etched in stone, it'll be fluid, but a starting point to work from that this group can read through and say, yes, I think this hits all the topics that we'd like, and we're okay with maybe some of the topics that we don't get to, or can we swap this for this, or we'd prefer a few less public engagement in an effort to craft a little bit more language here or there. We've had some of those discussions in-house already, so I think we kind of already have an idea of how we can prepare a budget-friendly process for you. I mean, the end result is a document, but there's a whole process that it takes to get there. So I think we have a path forward that we can present a reasonable path forward to a budget-friendly process that ends in a document. And it really ties to some of those tier one, these items that we've just talked about. For example, let's say transportation and infrastructure. So we talked about that a little bit earlier today. We included economic development as something that we would put in the plan, with the thought that if you had funds available at another time, or if you wanted to do a capital improvements plan, which is kind of a different focus than a comprehensive plan, you address those specific projects in need either separately or as an addition to later on. But we could, you could say swap that out for economic development, because you've got maybe another group, or whatever the nature of economic development in the community is, it may not be as much of a focus. That's one example. So I think we could craft a draft scope and kind of highlight, here's what we think we could do. We've put some thought into how to conduct public engagement. We've put some thought into, again, the big part of it is going to be data collection. We can give you some thoughts on how that could be conducted if you were to do that and just supply us the information. So I'm happy to do it. However, I think I've heard enough today to where, and it matches with a lot of the points that we had talked about before this meeting, just ourselves, trying to make some educated guesses, that we could put together a scope of work that has your budget in mind and hits on some of the broad topics that seem to be important to you.
What were the four that you and your team discussed that you thought was?
Land use, economic development, housing, and planning and public services.
What were your concerns or issues, or including economic development in that? Because most of our issues in economic development are really based on what Gay's saying is housing. That affects our workforce, our education, our commercial, our retail, quality of life. All those are issues, and the root of almost all those issues is housing. So just,
I think, and I'm going to defer to Dan, but I think that economic development is a component of that, because it helps to highlight, where the draws are for the community. Where are other people looking to find Lincoln County on the map? But Dan and Ethan, can you, I don't know if you heard the question, but can you make a connection and can you talk a little bit about the importance of economic development and maybe how that ties to housing in a comprehensive plan?
Well, one of the thoughts is that you want to have a growth strategy and a strategic and realistic growth strategy, which requires investment. So with the investment in employment, with the investment in institutional and recreational opportunities, with the investment in infrastructure, those do need rooftops in order to support that as those growth opportunities are occurring. So we see, or at least I see a synergistic relationship between providing a range of housing for the diverse folks that will take advantage of those economic growth and development opportunities.
Did that help?
Yeah, we've got jobs here. We just can't get people to move here. Like she says, whether it be middle class, affordable, high end, we can't get anybody that we get jobs here, and they live out of town. And that's not unique to Lincoln County. It's all over southern Middle Tennessee. But a lot of these roots of a lot of these issues on this list here go back to housing.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So Houston, what do you think a realistic time frame would be for you guys to get us a draft scope to review?
That's a little bit of a hard one, with next week being the week before Christmas, and a lot of people are taking some time off, working on their work-life balance. But we have done some, as Houston has indicated, we have done some front-end work. What would be fit within the time frame for your review and preparation for formal action. We have to be sensitive to those improvement processes that you have to go through.
And that's what I was going to ask. Let's maybe start forward and work our way backwards. Is it desirable? Is it desirable to have a contract for our services on the Lincoln County Commission or Planning Commission agenda sometime in January? I don't know when the turn in for that is, or is February acceptable? I think if we kind of know when we'd like to be under contract, which would formally start our work, then we can work backwards to that. If that's in February, which it sounds like it probably needs to be, I think we're looking at maybe first week of January to be able to have a draft back to you, and then you're going to have some coordination too with the steering committee. And
I think if we got something back early January, then we could get it out to everybody and then maybe meet back at the end of January.
I think that's a good timeline. I think if we got something in January, because we're gonna be looking at our appropriated money spent by maybe the end of June. So we need to be looking in March proposals for the next financial year. Because if I'm reading everything it said, we're looking at 2 years minimum, kind of getting everything to where we say, well, here's the document, we're not firing Crow Engineering, but they provided that, and they're still our partners. Is that, as far as a timeline, reasonable?
I think 2 years is probably longer than
necessary
than you really need.
Okay.
We'd love to be under contract for 2 years.
Probably will be.
But again, I think even for the complete scope, that's somewhere in the 12 to 18 month range if you were to extend it as far out. And also consider this steering committee too. 18 months from now, you're gonna be tired of talking about this comprehensive plan. But no, I think especially with the scope that we're looking at, with a more refined scope tailored to your budget, that's somewhere in the 9 to 12 month process, somewhere in that range. So, we were thinking October, November-ish, depending really on when we started. Our discussions were, of course, today kind of thinking, January we would start, and that looks like it may be into February some, and that's okay. But 9, 10 months, 12 months maximum probably for this part of it, and a little bit more if we get into it and add to it. And I hear what you're saying, that if there's a planning budget action that can be included in June, then maybe we take that into consideration. And one thing to consider is the timing of public input. So what I see that we'll do is we'll draft a scope of work that'll have a definition and what we'll include in the plan. If there's the thought or there's an opportunity that you wanted to include more, and a budget decision related to that sometime mid-project, that's perfectly fine. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to have a series or have all of the public input completed and neglect 2 or 3 items that you're going to add into it later on. So I think we can have a scope of work, and then maybe our public involvement includes some other parts and pieces that without an addition we just don't include detailed in the report, but we do maybe ask the questions of the public and kind of seek some input of that, to where if it is added, we don't have to go back and have another round of public engagement. So the public engagement was one way that we thought of, if there were to be a phase 2 or a midstream addition to the overall project scope, it would be short-sighted to have to restart public engagement for those items, whatever they may be. Then we can certainly work through that.
From Dan or Ethan, on a rural community like ours, you get the public response when you mention our county website, using that as getting a response from the public.
So
we don't get a lot of public response. We get more phone calls in our office than we do people responding on our county website, and we don't mind that. But my question really is in a rural community like ours, do we think we're going to get to the grassroots people on responding to this?
Responding how?
To what they think's important.
But you're not talking about just virtually, you're talking about face-to-face also.
Well, on that, if they're responding on, they can put their comments, I assume, on our website, right?
So we've thought of really two methods of public engagement. One, that you host 2 public open houses in a forum similar to this, where I'll stand up and introduce us and kind of give the broad perspectives of what we're asking for in the plan. There'll be some, whether it's a survey or just some note cards or some way to receive input on some of the topics. What's important to you? What do you see? Where do you see liabilities? Where do you see strengths? Those type of questions in a couple of public open houses. So you do that in a face-to-face with a presentation, and you also leave a way for folks to provide comments, whether that's emailing to us or emailing to a county email address, some kind of way, and also an online survey. Now, we'll be relying a lot on your support for how that's advertised and how the notices of that get to the public. But I think that's the broad perspective we see as far as public input. So there's an online component to it and a couple of public meetings that go into it. Dan, Ethan, is there anything more you want to address on the public engagement component?
One of the things that we've been successful with is coordination through the school PTAs, that using them as a network to encourage people to participate, whether it's to come to an open house or a survey. So we like the school system with its built-in network to utilize for getting the word.
And I'll add on to that. There's sort of a broader approach or strategy when it comes to public engagement that's moved away from hey, we're going to be at the county building from 5 to 8 o'clock. Swing by if you're able, and if you can, tough luck. That's when we're here. To a go to where people are approach. So rather than asking people to come to us, we work with you all to figure out where those community centers are, where the population gathers on a regular basis, to where we're able to capture a lot of people without having them go out of their way to see us. Basically, the more convenient you can make it, the more likely we are to get a response.
Dan, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I apologize in advance, and if you don't know, it's okay, but I just had this thought. Do you recall, or Ethan, do you recall how many public input responses we got in Gunnersville?
You caught me.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just thought about that, and I know we had a good many. I just didn't remember that. That's okay.
Yeah, I don't want to give an unrealistic number. I would have to look back into the project folder.
Yeah, I'm sure when the time comes, we can use, I'm sure the Del Valley Times and our radio stations will help us get that out there, and social media.
So another thought to consider too, just in overall project management, is how this group communicates, with us once we're moving. Our thought was to assign, a smaller subset, a management team that would help us to communicate directly with you, and in light of sending an email to, what could be 30 folks, which we're happy to do, but and vice versa, so that group and us would have monthly meetings on just progress status update meetings, and then we'd meet twice over the course of the work with the entire steering committee. So again, those are not defined in any way. That's just what our thought and conversation was relative to the involvement and our coordination with the steering committee. It's a monthly progress meeting, and then a collective meeting of everybody twice.
So if there's no objection, I mean, I think I'm hearing maybe sometime early January, you guys will get us back a
I
draft.
think, and I don't remember what the first Friday in January is, but that'd be my goal to have a draft to you by the 5th.
And then once we get that, I can disseminate that to everybody, and then we'll determine, work together to.
So I'll just send that, we'll
You
just
can
send that to
it
you?
me,
Okay,
yeah, and I'll
great.
make sure everybody gets a copy of that, and, making sure it gets to everybody, planning commission, county commission, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And then we'll set a date if we need to. I don't mind collecting comments, if you guys want to, we can review that online, and you guys can give me back comments, and I can consolidate all that and work with you to get the.
Yep. And I left, I've got a stack of my business cards. I'm going to leave, so make sure that you get one. Please feel free to call me, email me, text me. If you have a thought that you have a question about, don't hesitate to call and ask. That's what we're here for. And again, I'm not a planner. I may have to ask, probably will have to ask Dan or Ethan. But if you have a thought, something comes up, feel free to reach out. I'm not trying to be so rigid on a communication that we don't effectively communicate, but it helps when we have a group as large as this sometimes, just so that everybody kind of knows what the parameters are. But I'll have my cards here, so please feel free to call me, text me, email me if you have a thought, have a question, have a concern, really through any part of the process.
Houston, thank you.
Yeah,
Dan,
thank you so
Ethan
much.
online, thank you for being online with us.
Yeah.
Appreciate your presentation. Thank you for all you guys coming.
Thank you, Dan,
We'll-
Ethan.
We'll work the communication.